Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to the sanctuary. We got some new boats, so we must be diving into a new topic today. I am still your host, Professor C, and we're going to do some more A&P today. Specifically, we're going to jump into the world of muscles and do an introductory lecture about functions, characteristics, and types of muscle. So, let's do it. All right, before we jump into the dirty details of musculature, we need to do a quick introduction just to make sure that we're starting off all in the same place. So the problem is this. There were 206 bones when we looked at the skeleton, and that seemed quite daunting to a lot of people to learn all of those structures of so many bones. Well, when you want to talk about the muscular system, there are over 600 of these muscles, and it is quite frankly impossible to do a video on each separate muscle. So we're going to talk about the muscles in groups, and that will begin in a few lectures from now. So starting off with functions of muscles, very simply, I think if I asked even a small child what the purpose of a muscle is, they could come up with movement at some point very quickly. And as you can see, these runners jogging or running in the background here, they're obviously using their skeletal muscles to pull their bones, parts of their skeleton, and create their entire body to move forward, right? They can, however, they have some guts inside of their body where food is moving through and being processed. They have blood in their body that has to be moved. They have lymphatic structures. Those small, hollow, tubular organs inside the body are also moving. You just can't see them, of course, because the skin is covering all that up. So movement of entire body, movement of specific body parts, this is what muscles will do. At the end of the day, it's about moving, pushing, pulling something to somewhere else. However, you can get on the opposite train real quick. So notice this person here balancing on a rock. Obviously, she's using muscles, but she's not moving per se, right? She's very still. So we want to think about muscles not only providing movement to body parts, but also say like when you maintain your posture, like she's doing here, sometimes it can be incredibly difficult, and you use a lot of muscle activity to limit motion. Think about standing in line, something that many people do a lot in their life. It's quite difficult, actually, to coordinate the musculature to allow you to stand up straight and not fall over. It takes a lot more muscles than you might think. So maintaining posture, or this idea of limiting muscular motion, is an equally valid function of muscles. I can show that in a different way here when you talk about stabilizing joints. So I have the knee drawn over on the left and the shoulder placed on the right here. And we've talked about the knee a little bit, but I didn't put the musculature in there. And if you add that to the picture, it gets even more complicated. Same thing with the shoulder. We've seen a lot of the connections of the shoulder, but now if you add the musculature to it, it gets a lot more complicated. So think about it. You've got a shoulder joint, like your arm joint, that can move quite freely. It's a diarthrotic joint and has a lot of free ranges of motion, but you don't want it to rotate too far, right? You don't want it to bend up or down too far. So you have these sometimes called cuffs of muscles holding the bones together, holding the joints together, and actually allowing that joint to not move so much. So again, this concept of kind of anti-motion, using muscle groups to stabilize joints so they don't move too much. Now, this one's interesting because most of the time you're in control of your skeletal muscles. You can decide when your arm goes up, when your arm goes down, when your foot goes forward, when you turn your head. You can decide those things, and it lets you do a whole lot of activities in your life. However, sometimes your brain will take over your skeletal muscles, and it will control them, what we say autonomically. You could say automatically at this point, and it will start to twitch your muscles without your want. And this is, of course, to generate some heat. And the concept here would be shivering. So shivering is an important function in muscle. If you get too cold, you can contract very slightly the muscles on kind of an automatic system from the brain, and this will generate heat. You know this too. If you get too cold, You can get up and kind of run around the room a little while, and just moving around gets you warmer. Get up and play a little game with somebody where you're kicking a ball back and forth, and you will feel warmer because your muscles will allow you to be generating this heat. Okay, now got a little bit of a picture in the background of Stretch Armstrong. If you were a child that grew up in my era, perhaps this was one of the toys you had laying on the floor of your room. And what you did with your friends is you each grabbed a limb and you stretched this poor guy out until he couldn't stand anymore. But now that I'm older, I can use this image to illustrate most of the special characteristics of muscle. So the obvious one here is that muscles are extensible. They can be stretched, they can be lengthened, so they have some extensibility. They also have the ability, if I were to let go of the Stretch Armstrong, he would kind of slowly creep back to his original position. And we say this is contractibility. The muscle not only can lengthen and be extended, but can also be contracted and be shortened. And it can go back and forth between these two states. It has some sort of elasticity in itself that it can, when lengthened or shortened, inevitably return to its original length. Now, these three things you can illustrate with a simple toy. This last one is something, unfortunately, Stretch Armstrong cannot do. He is not excitable. He cannot receive information and respond to information, also known as stimulus, or here plural, stimuli, because he's got no nervous system, obviously. We do have a nervous system that connects our brain to our muscles, and we can send messages to it to tell it when, arm go up or arm go down. So this is called excitability, or sometimes it's called irritability, and some other things as well. But here are 4 important characteristics of muscle. It is extensible, it is contractible, it has some elasticity, and it is excitable. All right, I want to quickly go over this. We've seen this in prior lectures. If you want to see more details about this, go back to some of the earlier lectures in the histology section where I talk about the different types of muscles. But there are 3 types. This one I've mentioned quite a bit today, and it will be the primary focus of the lectures going forward are the skeletal muscles. But there are also some muscles in the wall of the heart known as cardiac muscles, and some muscles in other places that you don't usually think of that are called smooth muscles. So skeletal muscle looks like a stack of pipes that are ribbed. They have that ribbing, kind of that herringbone pattern you can probably see very well. So they are attached to the bones. That's why it gets their name, skeletal muscles. But some of them are attached, like especially in the face, a lot of them are attached to the skin too, and they pull some of the skin, say, to help you smile and make some gestures of your face. They are striated. That's the fancy word for striping, or stria, or stripes, or layers. So we see the striations quite clearly on these 5 long skeletal muscle cells that are in the background. And elongated is the next word we need to know. They look like big, long, ribbed pipes. If you can see the purple ovals that are scattered throughout the image, these are nuclei. And not only does a muscle cell have a nucleus, they often have many nuclei, and this should give you a hint about their function. They probably need to make a lot of proteins if they have so many nuclei. Now, they are voluntary. That means that in general you have control of when they fire or when they twitch, when you can raise your hand and when you can't. We have talked about a special case of skeletal muscle where they become involuntary, and that's the shivering idea again. Yes, they do have what's called fast twitches. That means they will contract, get shorter. That's the word for getting shorter, is to contract. And then they will relax. They will elongate back to their original position again. They do this quite quickly. Think about someone playing a piano with their fingers and having to quickly, very quickly, contract and relax those muscles repeatedly. Okay, some cardiac muscle here. Again, it looks similar but different, right? So found only in the myocardium. Myocardium is the wall of the heart. It's the muscular wall of the heart. It gives the thickness to the heart. It's the only place we find cardiac muscle. You do not find it in arteries or veins, only in the wall of the heart. It is striated similarly to skeletal muscle. It is bifurcated. That means it has splits. If you can see some of these cells, you can see it quite easily. Some you can't. There are some Y-shaped splits in here called bifurcations. And if you want to see the details again, go back and check out some of those histology videos. They are electrically connected. On here, if you can see, there's dark bands that look like they're scattered all over the screen. They're very dark purple bands that are separating the two cells, but they're not only separating neighboring cells, they're connecting them as well. And you want the heart muscles to fire on a certain rhythm, so we're going to connect them electrically to allow them to do this. They are involuntary, that is, you cannot control how fast your heart beats, even though you think that you can. It will control its own rhythm at some point. Smooth muscle is the last here. Can be confused with other types of muscle, but it is not striated, is why it's called smooth, and we don't see the striations because of that. This is an involuntary type of muscle as well, and we find it in the walls of what's called tubular organs, like, say, blood vessels or lymphatic vessels, or hollow organs, say, like the stomach, for instance. And again, you can't control how your stomach squeezes. You can't control how your blood vessels squeeze and release. That is completely out of your control. It is an involuntary motion. So instead of like a skeletal muscle and a heart muscle that contracts very quickly and relaxes very quickly, smooth muscle will have a slow and steady squeeze and release, almost like toothpaste in a tube compared to skeletal muscle. And this will allow it to have a rhythm called peristalsis that we'll talk about later. All right, hope you enjoyed the overview of muscles. We'll get into some more dirty details in the next one. Thanks for watching that one. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.